We're recording, Eddie. It's all yours.
Okay, so today we're going to talk around the topic of our sort of level 3 qualifications, what we thought was good about the course, but mainly what we having sort of experienced various lengths of careers so far following that course, like what we feel that we would have benefited from knowing then. So the things that we really wished we'd learned a bit earlier on and we felt was lacking on the level 3 qualification. I'm going to talk a little bit first, and then we will have a little chat around the room. But I think the biggest sort of thing that all those years ago was hardly mentioned, and I think is one of the biggest factors in becoming a good personal trainer, is the sort of adherence factor in training programs. Like, all of the sort of theory that you learn on the level 3, none of it's really underpinned by sort of selecting it based on client preference or what the client might enjoy. And it's such a big factor in having a good relationship with the client that then goes on to have like a positive relationship with exercise and does well and gets results. If they're not enjoying their time in the gym, or they're not sort of engaging with the exercises, it doesn't matter how good your theoretical knowledge is, they're just not going to engage with the program and get any results from it. And it was far too much sort of theory of exercise and theory of nutrition, rather than sort of the sort of theory of how people respond to things in like a psychological way, or sort of idea that we're still competing with, like, as a personal trainer in a gym, you're still competing with things like Zumba or like five-a-side football as like sources of exercise. So if we don't try and make it enjoyable, we're going to lose out to those things. So sparking a bit of healthy competition. But yeah, that's my sort of a big one. I'm sure there'll be other things that we can comment on. But going across the screen, we'll go, Kerry, your intro back into the world.
Hello.
And follow.
What I did and didn't like about the course. One thing that I just remember being told, that's always stuck with me, and I just thought it was a bit of a silly thing that I had so much emphasis on, was to not step over the bar. I don't know if anyone else had that, but that was when I was doing it. It was like, that was one thing that you would get an instant fail on. If you set up the bar and then you stepped over it instead of walking around it, that was like an instant, you failed. And I just remember that's one thing. And I think it was like a health and safety thing, that out of all of the things, that was like their key concern, was to not step over the bar, which I just thought.
That's like a major, like a major in the driving test.
Yeah. That was a major. That was an instant fail. Just like,
mirrors.
Whatever I do not step over the bar. Yeah, that's just like one of the things I remember. Just thinking now, that's just a bit silly. You writing that down, Ollie, so you don't do that.
Gary, I've not seen you do it. I've never seen you do it. So
I know, it's just stuck with me. You know, probably if I did, that's probably how I do this. So, but yeah, I just thought sometimes there's too much emphasis on things like that, rather than, like you said, creating more of a bind with clients. That's something that we didn't really go over. And another thing was how to, like any kind of business, like especially if you're working on your, like by yourself, that's something that we didn't really, I didn't get taught at all, like how to get clients yourself, or even like walk in the gym or anything like that. There was no real help with those kind of things.
Yeah, no information in mine on like marketing, social media, websites, business accounts, and we know that all those things like are super important in becoming like successful and actually being able to have a career in something, if you have a sense of those things. But I don't know why they're not included. I think that almost with the PT courses, it seems like sort of like a race to the bottom in terms of who can provide the basics of the level 3 for the cheapest possible cost. So they're sort of, I'm sure in days gone by, there were modules in each one where there was a business element, but it's like, okay, that gets chopped because they just need to know the basics and they just need to get them through the sort of, as long as they're safe and they're on the gym floor, what do we care if they're successful? So I think the sort of the demand for cheaper courses is probably to blame for the standards sort of decreasing over the years. But all that will eventually do is just make the standard of personal training so poor that we're all going to be harmed by that if everyone thinks that personal trainers are idiots who don't know what they're talking about and have got no business sense. Like it will stop someone from seeking out a personal trainer, whether that's someone that's good or not, it doesn't matter. We'll go across to Dan.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice point to come in on, Eddie, because I agree with you. Now when people are ask me about how to get into personal training and what course they should do, genuinely what I tend to tell them is just pick the course which you can get done in the quickest amount of time to become qualified. And then from there, here are some good education providers for how to upskill and actually learn how to do personal training, which is a shame to have to sort of advise that. And I think that it has been a product of what you've just described, which is that the emphasis seems to be on just passing people, and the boxes you need to tick to do that are mainly health and safety, which kind of dovetails with what you were kind of saying, Kerry, about as long as people can demonstrate they're not going to hurt anyone, why not? There's some arguments that make, a bit like a driving test, like you say, really, there's all that cliche about people learn to drive after they pass their tests and actually get on the roads. So maybe there's an argument for saying, okay, maybe that's just the way it is. But I think the thing that's the biggest shame about that is if you've got 3 to 6 months of a course with someone who wants to get into personal training, there is so much knowledge that you could give someone in that time that would really, really help them be prepared for working with clients. Especially if experience of someone who's been a personal trainer for a long time, that is such an appreciable length of time to be able to really help someone understand some of the things that, say, we come into contact with a lot, or do a lot more work on client case studies, or have elements of the course that might involve training more people, offering some kind of thing where you could train, clients could train with you for a discounted price because you're a trainee or whatever, and actually get some experience on the gym floor. The fact that none of that's being done is the shame. Because I agree with you guys, there's a lot of emphasis on things that never really are used, and then zero emphasis on things that you use on a day-to-day basis. And some of the points about nutrition and psychology are obvious ones, for sure. I certainly felt coming out of mine that I didn't feel equipped in terms of like what I'm actually going to do on day one with my client when I meet them, and any kind of plan I might have had based off a loose program that was in the course, like you say, goes out the window when the client's like, oh, I don't like that, or my last trainer made me do this and I didn't like it. So yeah, for me, it's just it's a shame. And then maybe my last thought on it was, and this isn't of course the case for everyone, but I think a lot of the time, by the time people have made the decision to want to be a personal trainer, they probably already have a reasonably keen interest in fitness. And I think a lot of the information you learn in that course, a lot of it feels like sucking eggs for someone who actually already understands things like strength training or heart rate zones or different, naming muscles in the body. So then you spend a lot of time learning stuff that you already know, and then not learning stuff that would really help you actually get into the profession, like you guys have mentioned, the business side of things and how to deal with clients. So yeah, it's in an interesting spot. In terms of the future of it, I'm not sure, Ed. I'm not sure if there's much of a market in making a qualification which is more robust, if it's going to take longer and be more difficult, or whether the future of PT education is just the entry into the industry is essentially just a small financial barrier to do the course. And then after that, what separates people has to be the qualifications they go on to get voluntarily after that point.
Just out of interest, what format did people's level 3 take? Because mine, I just did mine once. But were people in classrooms or?
No, mine was essentially all online. I was working in a different industry at the time and needed to get it done. I was still working all the time, so I did a complete online course. I then had just the only practical thing I did was the one day I went in to train someone in front of the assessor, submitted some kind of practical hypothetical program for a client.
So 1 day in the gym?
Yeah.
For a career in one?
Correct. Too late to sack me now, Eddie.
Mine was in the classroom and in the gym, because I did mine through I was already working as a level 2, and I got mine through the gym that I was working at. So it was alongside me working. So I got paid to do mine alongside my job, which was cool. Just have loads of experience, Dan. So.
Ollie, what about you?
Mine was kind of a hybrid of the two. Mine was mostly online, and then I think 4 afternoons in a gym setting or a classroom setting. So it was kind of a mix of the two, which was useful, but 2 of the classroom days would classrooms with about 30, 40 people in them. So there wasn't any more than kind of sitting and listening to someone speak.
I was in the gym for all of mine.
Was that back in the 80s? Yeah.
Just with one guy. I found it super useful. I guess he could be way more specific with what I was good or bad at, though.
Yeah.
How long did yours take?
I can't remember. 5 months? 6 months? I don't know.
But just to bring it up, that now that you can go do a course which is 6 weeks long. You can go do an intensive course for 6 weeks where you get level 2 and level 3.
That's so mad.
In and out.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's basically advertised on the least amount of time, like you mentioned, or the lowest cost.
Yeah.
Those two. If you wanted to sort of, I think it's sort of Premier Global that are still stuck to their guns a little bit with a longer, more comprehensive course, but I think it must be losing market share to cheaper places, because they offer something that takes so much longer and it's so much more expensive that I think people would just look at it and be like, oh, I'll just do the massage course separate if I want to do it, or I think if you speak to Dan Baldwin, he did a course that had multiple modules and took best part of a year, I think.
But also, mate, if we think outside of the UK, in different states in America, it's the sort of thing you can go get qualified in over the weekend to be qualified to be a personal trainer.
Yeah, the CrossFit one is 2 days, I think.
CrossFit instructor, yeah.
2 days.
Yeah, teach someone how to do a snatch.
Mad.
Russ, obviously we've worked together on the academy along with Dan, and a lot of the content we tried to include was based on sort of what we wished was on the level 3, or what we sort of learned over the years. Which of those sort of elements do you think was the most important, or has been the sort of guide in producing much of that content?
Yeah, it's been covered a few times. I think everyone said something similar with regards to where the level 3 places emphasis. It's not that they didn't teach Kerry not to step over a bar badly. They seem to have taught that so well that that's the one thing she's retained. I'm sure there are others as well, but that's the kind of, that's the lasting memory. It's more where you as an educator place the emphasis is where the learner will also lean into. And so I think giving an equal amount of space on the academy to nutrition as you do to programming, and then giving a heavier weighting towards practical application, what you're actually going to do when you're coaching a client on the gym floor, is probably our attempt to better represent what the job actually entails. And when you're talking about nutrition, you're talking about applied sciences. So, there is an aspect to which you'll be able to navigate the world of fitness information slightly better if you do understand, what the macronutrients are called, and, the terminology is relevant. But once you've got a baseline understanding of the terminology, everything else you will do with the client is all about practical application. And the medium with which you'll do that is through conversation, 95% of the time, 5% of the time through email and over the phone, or maybe now Zoom. But it's all going to be conversational style. So unless you are spending some time working with a partner, working on the gym floor, coaching someone, talking to each other about consultations, delivering consultations, trying to talk to someone about how to lose weight, you are always going to be shocked, surprised, and somewhat unprepared when you actually get your first client. Hopefully our graduates from the academy came out with the experience, just knowing what skills they should lean into in order to be better at the job.
Yeah, and obviously you're sort of contributing more to the nutritional side of that process as well. What have you found has been the sort of perhaps the big thing lacking with some of the people that we've seen, like who've recently come off of level 3?
Yeah, it's a tough one because there's always a scope that someone could argue that as a personal trainer, it's not necessarily a nutrition focused job. In that, again, I see arguments from people all the time saying, I'm a personal trainer, I deal with X, Y, and Z, exercise correction, exercise selection, all that kind of stuff, and I would be within my rights to refer out to a nutritionist or a specialist in that field if the client had those goals, which is fine. But I think when we get back more into the practicality of things, and actually your client realistically is probably just going to be working with yourself, that just not getting involved in nutrition doesn't feel like you're offering enough of a service to help that client with goals towards their health or fitness or anything like that. But it certainly is the area that, I don't know if you guys agree on the academy from being on it, where when we kind of put the hands up at the start of, are there any areas people struggle with? Quite often people are saying nutrition. And I think that's because it's probably the biggest example in the level 3 of where they'll dive deep into some of the kind of cellular biology of stuff, almost sort of at random, but then not really pull it back well enough into how the hell you go about applying any of that with a client. And it's almost like the course is sort of short enough and detailed enough to leave people feeling more confused than when they went into it, and being like, oh God, now I know that nutrition is really complicated. So I don't want to touch it. Whereas even maybe before the course, they might have just applied some common sense to it and thought, well, if someone's eating a bit too much, they're having too many junk food and stuff like that, I'll tell them to eat less of it. That's probably more sensible than coming out with a head full of long words that you don't really understand and then trying to juggle that. So yeah, I think that's what we found by doing the academy, and why I found it so rewarding is, personally, I find that it's not a huge undertaking to just steer someone a little bit more into sensible parameters of how to coach nutrition, not having to get outside their scope of practice, but just actually grounding things a little bit more about how you can help your client. Just had, if you don't mind, Eddie, just had kind of a bit of a wider point on things. I'm listening to you chat there, Russ, a bit about the role of the academy and things like that. I just think it's whether our expectation on the level 3 is correct. Should we be expecting the level 3 to be this amazing course in which everyone comes out excellent personal trainers? If you look at other jobs, so even if you take a job like an estate agent or something like that, it's not that someone's going through some kind of long course that teaches them how to be really good at it. It's that they'll have whatever A-levels or things that make them a reasonable applicant for the job, and then when they go for it, they're taken under someone's wing and they learn the trade and they learn the practice and they learn how to be good at that job. And that's the case whether you're a banker or working in stocks or whatever it is. And obviously at SIX3NINE we have that. So pretty much everything I've learned about being a personal trainer, I've learned by being part of a team of people with more experience than me, and I've learned how to be a better coach working with clients, blah 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 blah. The danger is people will do the level 3, and then if they're self-employed or if they're working in a big gym where there isn't a focus on that, and there is no initiative taken or to go and do other courses, then you don't get that. You don't get that experience of actually learning. The best way in which you can learn to be a PT is have actual clients and have someone to troubleshoot different questions with who has more experience than you. That's how you become good at the job. But because there's no one saying you have to do that, it's very easy, I think, as a freelance PT to qualify, and then just try and wing it without having any kind of mentor or anyone helping you through that process. And I just wonder if maybe the direction the industry needs to take, or the message that needs to be given, is to freelance trainers and people who aren't working in a system like ours already, is to find one, either to manufacture a network of other personal trainers to troubleshoot ideas with, or get involved in some kind of ongoing education course, rather than just us begrudging the level 3 for not doing it all for us. Should the onus be more on the trainer once qualified to make sure they're getting continued professional development and guidance from people with experience?
I think one of the...
Yeah, I think while there's like the problem, the level 3 of producing trainers of a certain standard, whether that's good or bad, but they're going into an industry that's not necessarily set up for people who are like not in a position to do well in business. Like it's either one thing or the other. The industry needs to be a better place to welcome people who are more junior, or the course needs to improve to survive. Like when I did my sort of 1.5 to 2 years in LA Fitness, like the churn was huge. Like every few weeks there'd be some trainer that was just completely clueless about expectations in the business, how they were going to talk to people on the gym floor, how they were going to earn any money. I think of the people that I started with, there was probably, out of like 15 people, there was like 3 or 4 left at the end. And in the interim time, there's just so many people that sort of came and went after a few weeks. Russ, I'm sure you have a similar sort of experience at Fitness First. Sorry, you were at Fitness First?
Yeah, no, I did. But I think, you covered it very well. Like the experience of getting into the industry is extremely poor, and you're not guided by the level 3 in any proper way. But also, there's nothing for you when you finish working as a personal trainer either. There's not much of it. I've heard so many trainers over the years saying, oh, well, I don't want to be doing this when I'm 45. I've got to look for my exit plan out of the industry. And that's all based on, someone doing that on their own. So the industry spends not very much time at all building these trainers up, and then loses its most experienced individuals who could be mentors, who could provide that guidance to younger ones. And they go on to run gyms, move out of the industry, do something different, become writers, become social media content producers, whatever. And so the industry loses them. And so I think there is no governance, really, or no effective governance, looking after you as a personal trainer at all. I think the representation for personal trainers in the industry is absolutely shocking. So I think it's at both ends of your career. You are dumped in the deep end, and it doesn't feel any better at the other end as it does at the beginning when you come into it, to be honest.
Kerry, you had your hand up then?
Thanks. I was just going to say, I think if you look at other governing bodies for, like I know in sports massage, to be accredited by a governing body, you have to do a certain amount of hours per year to still hold your qualification or be under that governing body. And there doesn't seem to be anything. So I passed my PT qualification when I was 19. I could have not done anything at all to do with training, never worked in a gym, and then decided now at 26, we're like, oh, okay, now I fancy doing that. And that there's no like proof that you have been learning or doing anything to do with your job. It's just one that you could have done your 6-week course and then not done anything with it for 10 years and then go work in a gym and be like, oh, you still have that qualification, but there's no like follow up or to like check that you're doing everything to still hold that accreditation. So yeah,
I think maybe what I'd add on to that, Kez, as well is because I know obviously reps, there is CPD with reps, right? And so people do the course add on and you have to maintain your membership with reps. But I think the problem with that is that doesn't mean anything for your client. So because your client doesn't know what reps is or doesn't care if you've got a kettlebell add-on or if you did a weightlifting weekend or whatever. And equally, I don't know how much it really matters to an employer Because certainly, like in our kind of place when we're employing people, you're going to do an interview, you're going to see how they coach. And if they're a good coach, it doesn't matter if they've done a kettlebell weekend or not. And equally, if you're a big box kind of gym trying to hire people, and maybe this isn't right, but it often feels with those places, you're going to get the job if there's a vacancy for the job and they need someone to come in and do those sessions. And if there isn't, you won't, regardless of how good or bad you are. It's a little bit more kind of economically driven. So I think in terms of the continued professional development, that someone might be in a position where they go, well, what's the point of me doing CPD with reps? Because it doesn't mean shit to my clients and it costs me a load of money to do it. Whereas I think the mindset, and equally my employer is probably not going to employ me anymore for doing it. But what would be better maybe is seeking out courses or different avenues or mentorship, say, where it's not that you're going to get a certificate that says, I did this, look how good I am. It's that you're genuinely going to be better. And you're going to understand how to check with your clients and actually, probably to your point, Eddie, run your business better as well. But it's actually having a bit more of that long-term, that mindset with it, which you're responsible for your professional development. And it's not just a case of ticking boxes.
In massage, it's even like you can just say what books you've read. So it's even like, oh, I've read this book, I've watched this online. And it even counts if you meet up and discuss. Like, there's not really much way of proving it, but it's just kind of like what we're doing now, so like discussing things that would count towards your hours, and you have to just try and hit like a certain amount of hours that you're trying to keep up to date with what's going on.
Russ, you mentioned talking a bit more about psychology and coaching, that sort of stuff, being coached a bit more. And I think, Dan, you mentioned more about the actual coaching of nutrition. I think a kind of a place that would kind of tie those two nicely together would just be kind of the level, the kind of hierarchy of detail that we need to actually coach people well. And I think that in that level 3 PT, there's a tendency to go into very kind of granular detail, looking at enzymes, looking at cell biology, looking at the different ventricles of a heart. And it's useful later on, but I don't think it's necessary. You can't change the way that your blood flows around your body just because you know more about it. You can't necessarily change which enzymes do what, although you may be able to change what you eat. And I think understanding that as a novice trainer is really important. I think there should be some teaching of how to think about these things as well at the beginning, because I think one of the problems is you get exposed to all of this information, which is fantastic information, but later on, and I think it can put people off. At least that was my experience. And I was very quickly put off of biology and physiology because there were lots of words that I didn't have anything to attach to, because I didn't actually have the experience or the understanding of where they actually applied. And so I think if we are going to learn about this granular detail, it should be caveated with that it may be stuff you may want to be interested in later, and here's a few avenues in which you may choose to go down in the future. But immediately you need to build this framework that you can latch these ideas and concepts onto, because until you have that framework, these ideas won't stick, and you're essentially throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks. And I don't think it's effective. And I think people come out of, and I think this is also very similar in school as well. You are taught to memorize stuff that doesn't mean anything to you because you haven't done anything. And I think that I think that complexity is thrown into these courses as a way to upsell and to elevate these companies. If there's more complexity in there, it means that it's better, but actually it doesn't necessarily. It just means that there's more complexity in that. So I think that there should be a usefulness filter, or like a usefulness graph, like color chart that you could put against all of the information as you go through it. And I think that might be a nice addition to make to the level 3.
Yeah, I completely agree, Monty. I think that's a good assessment, perhaps, of education in general, but completely agree. You're right. You're learning things that you can't attach any context to because you've never seen it in practice. You know, if you were trying to build a really good course that actually helped, I think it would just be a case of, if I wasn't a personal trainer, I wanted to become qualified, what I would love is for throughout the 6 months I did it with that training provider, they were able to give me 3 clients or 2 clients or 1 client that I worked with for that period of time. The deal obviously would be those clients would be getting a reduced rate of personal training with that provider or whatever, so they knew that they were getting someone who was a trainee personal trainer. And throughout that period of time, rather than some hypothetical case study that I'm writing up on someone I've never trained, that I'm actually working with clients, maybe under supervision, maybe in my own time. And then the stuff we're learning on the course, like about the different things, I'm actually implementing that then with someone. And then I can go to a supervisor, oh yeah, but I tried doing this and it didn't work because that person doesn't like lunges. And then at least that opens a dialogue about that and about, we're probably going to find that in the real world. So 100%, even if you kept that level of complexity, you have to have some kind of practical thing to balance it with. Otherwise, it really doesn't mean anything when the right people are just trying to remember words to pass the test with on the exam day.
Yeah, there's also that sort of element of the modules be set up on your level 3, and they're not really given any particular weighting like of what's important or what's relevant to clients. And even though a lot of the courses like based in sort of science and scientific practices, there's no, from what I remember, discussion on like scientific methodology or like which methods are more valid than others, where you should get information from, what sources you should be reading. It's all kind of, there were a lot of people sort of that we've seen on the academy that have sort of come largely still with their own ideas on things like nutrition or training, and it's not really been in a position to have been challenged on the level 3 about the validity of certain training methods or dietary myths. I know we get a bit of a kick out of going through some of those myths on the academy, and it's because it's like necessary, because people still come out of that course believing a lot of stuff that has no basis in truth. So even though they're learning like some nutrition physiology, they just kind of let that sit alongside other things they think to be true. So I think a discussion on like sources of information and which of those sources are more trustworthy would be super handy as well.
Definitely. And I think also one of the real, I mean, I don't want to be morose about it. I'm very passionate, I'm massively passionate about making this better. So I don't always want to talk about what's wrong with it. But one of the things that upsets me about it is that it seems to affect the conscientious coaches more drastically than the sort of ignorant ones. So if you don't care about the standard of information that you're giving to your clients, you're not really that interested or invested in whether it is right or wrong, and you're just more interested in other aspects of the lifestyle of being a PT, then it won't affect you too much, because you're just going to market yourself based on other means. If you are a coach who really cares about training your clients well, looking after people, and ultimately that's going to make you a better coach, better people manager, which is part of the massive part of training is managing your clients. Then I've spoken to too many people who have been in the industry for a while and have got imposter syndrome because they're conscientious about the advice they're giving out, and they don't feel confident in what they know. And sometimes what they know is absolutely right, and it's just, it's just because somebody else has thrown a long word in here, or somebody else has got more clients, that without a social bubble around you, without a team, without a network, anybody I think would end up feeling slightly isolated, and sort of plagued with self-doubt about what you're doing with your clients. And of course, if you're trying to pick up clients and you're doubting yourself, that's not going to make for a very good sort of presentation of what your services are, because you're going to be really unsure of yourself. So those are the very PTs that clients want. You want somebody who's conscientious, who cares about you. But unfortunately, what it leads to at the beginning is this kind of shyness or insecurity about being right. And I think that's one of the real sort of tragedies. And that's why, there's a driving force behind starting to do mentoring and putting this community together, via an app, is to try and create that network for people so that you don't have that self-doubt. And like you say, you cover some of that scientific information, and that can provide a solid solid footing on which somebody can sell themselves, market themselves, speak to clients confidently, and relax into a career, as opposed to always looking over your shoulder at what somebody else is doing.
Yeah, just on that topic, I think a lot of people on the app will likely resonate with that message, but just for those unfamiliar with the term imposter syndrome, can you just give them a little, I know a lot of it was topically discussed in that, but just because I think a lot of our members will resonate with that, but just to give them a bit of a working definition.
Yeah, it's just that feeling of being in a community of which you don't really belong because you feel like you lack an attribute that the rest of the community has. Probably be my summary on it. So often that can be, depends on where we look. So you look around you and you see somebody who's got more knowledge than you. That makes you feel like you don't belong until you know as much as that person. You look around and you see someone with their t-shirt off and they're more ripped than you are, and that makes you feel like you don't belong. So unfortunately, it's propagated by the loudest and most visible people on social media aren't always the best coaches. Sometimes they can be and sometimes they can't be, but it's too much of a lottery. So the people that you actually end up seeing more often are further into their career, and therefore going to be more disparate from yourself if you're just starting, and also not necessarily always well correlated with being the model that you might want to follow. So I think that's, yeah, it
kind of sits somewhere opposite arrogance on the scale. But having that sort of conscientious is usually a good thing. It's just when it causes sort of such a lack of confidence that it ends up being a barrier to training clients well. So it's definitely something that needs sort of addressing, because while it's good to be conscientious, if it produces so much anxiety, it needs addressing for that to be something that is sort of nipped in the bud. Yeah,
that was a more eloquent summary than mine. So that's good.
Sources of information. Does anyone else have any sort of topics that they'd jotted down or that they feel would be beneficial to talk about? I'm conscious that we probably only have a few minutes, so can maybe get another couple of points in. Dan?
Yeah, okay, mate. I'm conscious of the time too, so I'll try and make this my summary points to help. I think we're talking about what's achievable within reasonable timeframes, and in terms of overriding the level 3 and making it a lot better, maybe that's something that can happen in time. But if right now the advice for someone starting out the industry or getting into the industry, for me, would have to still be at this stage, get the level 3 done, and that is what it is. But the thing that actually makes you a better personal trainer is experience, and that's very difficult to get at the start, of course. So the way in which you increase your experience is, yes, start doing personal training yourself, but as soon as you can is build a network of other trainers. Because if you have 5 trainers that you're troubleshooting ideas with, you're also taking their experience. So even if there's only 5 of you have each got 1 client, you've suddenly got 5 clients to talk about and compare. So definitely building up a network straight away, and also knowing that the onus at the moment in this industry is on you to seek out the education to become a better trainer at the moment. So whether that is actually going on courses that are going to teach you things, or whether it's even just joining Facebook groups or communities like our one, or different things, just following people who are experienced trainers and getting involved in the debate about those kind of topics. But right now, the best thing you can do is try and seek that out yourself and find other people to communicate with about what you're doing.
Yeah, I think particularly, if you're going into a self-employed environment, if you're prepared to be self-employed, then be prepared to get no help in terms of running your business or in developing your career. So if you're going to work in a gym and there's other trainers in there, milk them for information, find out who the best trainer is there in terms of someone who's training the most clients, who's getting good results, who seems to be doing good gym floor sessions. Just go and spend time with them, even if they're busy. Just ask them for some sessions, pay for a couple of hours of their time, because it'll be valuable if they're if they've made it work in the environment that you're going into. That's the person to speak to, not someone online or someone that has no concepts of the scenario you're in. Kerry, do you have your hand up, or are you just stretching?
No, I thought I didn't actually have my hand up, but I thought that's what I did when I first started in the gym. When I first qualified, I used to just train with the other trainers when they were free, and I found that really useful, just picking up different exercise variations, and I just thought that was really good. I learned a lot more from training with other trainers than I did on the actual course.
Yeah.
I think a module on learning how to learn and learning how to teach would be useful, because I think once you've passed your exam, go like you pointed out, or somebody pointed out, finding sources is difficult, and then also filtering those sources and knowing what's useful, what's not, what's nonsense, and what's just trying to, what companies and courses are just trying to sell another product. I think being able to filter that would be quite useful. And then also how to manage the motivation throughout a session. I don't think that's taught enough. I don't think how to keep people on a high throughout that session, how to get them to feel good as they go through it, how to manage their emotions as they go through it as well. I think a module on that would be quite useful as well.
Nice. I'm not sure. I think probably Russ has more information on where we're going after this, in terms of where other resources might be for trainers who maybe just done their level 3 or are looking to sort of expand their skill set. So maybe I'll let Russ finish off and just have the last word on what's the best steps to take from here if you find yourself listening to us 6.
Yeah, I think there are a number of different communities around, which has already been mentioned a couple of times, and I think finding some of those and then being able to sift through. I think what we will do potentially after this video has gone up is actually put together just a small pack of resources that involve some pointing in the direction of some communities that are useful, that we based on our experience, we kind of understand to be good information, a good source of information. And also if there are any good resources for learning and self-development in areas where the level 3 might be lacking, then we'll include some of those in there as well. And as we said, I think earlier, that just represents the tasks that people are going to be up against their first few clients, or even indeed after they've been in the industry for a while.
Yes, well, thanks everybody for contributing to the chat. We will finish the recording there, which I don't have the capacity to do, but we'll just cut.
We'll cut off here.
Right, that's